Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Pinal Dave, and I'm super delighted today that I have with me an amazing person, a great author. And I can talk more about it, but he's a CEO, founder, a lot of things. And I actually would like Ben to talk about himself and give introduction. So who is Ben and what's End of Abundance in Tech book? And on the top of it, there are so much fun stuff we are going to talk about it. So yeah, over to you, Ben. I think let's start, jump in. We have a folks on a time. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this conversation. And I always love talking to other people that have diverse backgrounds, and then we have a great conversation. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about is what we're going to be talking about, which is FinOps Observability and some of the things that we've done and
Right.
sort of how things have changed. My background actually started about 25 years ago, and I got the privilege of founding a company called Fortified Data, which we've grown over the last 25 years. And when I started off my career, it was around helping clients around the world solve complex problems around data. And one of the things that I had the ability to do was really to travel around the world and design a lot of the initial private clouds, large SQL Server implementations, scale my systems, and also do some of these high risk projects. And that really helped uh, allow me to see what works and what doesn't work within technology. But it also allowed me to understand more of the full stack, but the pivotal role that data plays within every organization, which I think some of the organizations today are somewhat losing sight on what it takes to support mission critical systems. And then about 4 years ago, as every entrepreneur does, what do? We started another business, right?
Right.
So I started another company called Fortified, and we were
Right.
building a FinOps data management tool that is helping, I call it data engineers and other individuals in a business really help understand, the health, the capacity, and financial implications of data. So that's really what I've been up to for the last 4 years. And during COVID, got to write a book.
Right.
And one of the things around this book in the title says "End of Abundance in Tech, the sky is not falling,"
Right.
but it does talk about how we do need to change some of our thought processes. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that during this conversation. So I'm not going to spoil the end.
Right. And I think you are right. End of Abundance in a Tech. Like when I read the particular title, I was pretty excited because every time when you go to organization, they are facing some challenge with resources and a lot of things. People always end up saying, "Oh, that particular resource is cheap. We have a lot of hard drives, cheap." But I mean, we keep on saying things like that, but
Yep.
we should not be saying things so easily or loosely because
Correct.
that can be just work against us, and when we are not aware of it. And when I was just going through some of the part of the book, and I was just going through like, oh, this is exactly what happened to me in my life. So I have two questions about book before we go to the technical stuff. We have a lot of technical folks joining in, so we dive deep in it. But
Yes.
what really made you like, I really want to write this book? Like, this is my motivation. What was that? That one thing.
I think the biggest driver is when I started in technology about 30 years ago. I actually had to worry about loading memory high and low just to be able to
Mhm.
run an application. I had
Right.
the privilege, I call it a privilege to code in COBOL. I wrote my first ETL process in COBOL and JCL and designed my first data warehouse in DB2. And when we were back in those days, we had to worry about what we used because
Yeah.
resources were precious. They were not in abundance, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about as we evolved and we have Moore's law with the processors and that they just keep getting more and more powerful, all of our developers get 12 or 16 vCPU boxes, laptops,
Laptops.
and
Yeah.
16 gigs of memory. Think about what we're doing. We're giving all this, and last, 10 or 20 years ago, that was a server. Today, it's a laptop. So
Right.
what is happening is I saw that we are changing our thought process when we're coding and designing applications. We're not thinking about, hey, the implications of saying, yes, let's store more data or let's store data for 7 or 12 years. and the
Mhm.
cost implications and the resource implications of that one decision. And I wanted to be able to share this story around that we need to start to think about the design and the long-term impact of that decision that you just made to design that piece of code, to design that data model, design that solution, because that system will live for probably 5, 10, 15, 20,
Correct.
25 years.
Right.
And that's where, unless you have a big checkbook, you cannot just keep adding more, adding more, adding more, because you are going to
Resources.
pay for it. And that's sort of the premise around the book.
And that's awesome because like there was a moment and it doesn't happen nowadays, but there was a time when I go to an organization and then people ask me, is our server good enough?
Yes.
Is it powerful enough? And my answer was, if your phone is more powerful than that, then I think we have questions to ask to us. Like, is it like, can we have a more powerful phone with more CPU and memory, and your server itself is struggling? I think there is a balance. There is a lot of questions, and it's not about resource planning, but it's about thinking a step ahead, looking into the future, which we can't predict, but looking a little bit in it and say, you know what, this is what is my main priority, and we can do that. And I think that one of the word which we keep on hearing nowadays, and I think it's interesting. So I just want to have the definition of
Yes.
right on the front, like what is FinOps or what is FinOps observability? Like, I mean, this sounds like, I mean, I'm a DBA. I don't,
Great.
I mean, should I care? I mean, should I know? I mean, is it for me or is it just
Yeah.
one of those what for my bosses?
Yes. Well, I'd say it's not just a new buzzword. FinOps and observability have both been around as separate disciplines for the last
Mhm.
probably about decade. And when you think about, I'm going to start with FinOps.
Okay,
FinOps is showing financial transparency of technology and having those discussions with business, which is basically finance,
right.
application owners, and
Mhm.
infrastructure, because all of those three parties need to come together to understand the cost of that technology design, etc. The
Mhm.
other part of this is observability. So there's this concept of I need to be able to bring data in from across the enterprise, across all these separate platforms and tools and systems, integrate it, and enable you to build your own view of that data. And the reason why we're merging these two together is, as soon as I say that something costs a lot of money, Pinel, what do
Yeah,
you say? You say,
I mean,
well, can I optimize it? How do I
absolutely. I want,
optimize it? Right?
yeah, I don't want to spend that much money. That is what I would
Yeah.
be saying when I see the dollars. Yeah.
And that's where we're merging it, because as soon as I tell you something costs a lot of money, you're going to say, well, what process or what data is increasing that cost or is a large part of that cost? And since observability allows us to see inside the workload, meaning inside the database workload, uh,
Hmm.
I could actually start to show you the pieces of code that cost that much money so that you could actually reduce your bill. And that's how we are merging and why we're merging both of those together, um,
Right.
to help provide a better view for our end users, those data engineers that are out there.
Right. So one of the question which a lot of my client always ask me, like how much, what is in it for me? Like when
Yes.
I give a suggestion, like their first question is like, what is in it for me? See, if I have to sum up FinOps observability in alternative words, like this is what you will get. What would be those words? Maybe just saying it loudly, maybe some unit,
Yes.
or what would be that?
So the two biggest wins that you will have that we've seen out there for data engineers are this: when you have a discussion today and you find that piece of code that is what we call not a solid piece of code or bad, poorly written SQL statement, what
Right.
do? We go to our boss, our manager, or the application and go, hey, we need to get this piece of code rewritten. It's using 100,000 CPU cycles and 5 million IO or reads, right?
Right.
So we're using technology terms to talk to that individual. That individual, in our experience in the past, has gone, oh, let's not worry about that, because guess what? Server resources are cheap.
Cheap.
That's what they think. Okay.
Right.
So then they do not approve you to code and maybe optimize that piece of code. So if I change that conversation today to do the FinOps story. Hey, this
Uh-huh.
piece of code has cost you $5,000 a year. I think I could get it down to $100 a year. Can we optimize this? And they go, so you could save $4,900 a year? Yes, by me adding one index. Well,
Right.
go for that. Let's get this implemented. So when I changed the terminology, the business and the managers actually have better context because we all understand the value of a dollar, but we do
Right.
not all understand what a CPU cycle is or an
Exactly.
IO, right?
Yeah.
So that's how sort of how it's going to enable you to sell. But there's a second benefit is this. Once you tune that piece of code, how do I show the value that I bring to the organization? How do I show that I just saved that company that $4,900? Well,
Correct.
now I can actually start to track the savings I am bringing the company and not just saying I made something faster, because that's what we usually do today. So how do we start to not only help us get other, uh, I call it challenging pieces of code
Right.
optimized and sold, but also how do we track the impact or value you're bringing back to the application?
Fantastic. And this brings me to a very interesting observation I had a few days ago. Like one of the client kept on saying, hey, our CPU is right now running for 90%. Can you
Yes.
make it run for 10%? And now my question back to them was, is it 10% better or 90% better? How do you define it? Do you want to
Yes.
let your 90% of CPU go west, or you just want to utilize the CPU which you have purchased? And
I always,
this, yeah, please. So
I,
this was the question. And they went into like they were looking at the blank. I was like, we have not defined the purpose behind the CPU consumption. And
correct.
when I'm hearing you saying this FinOps observability, it seems like I found a purpose to define the what actually we are talking. Saving is not a purpose. Utilizing, maximizing, getting most out of it. So if these questions come to you, I want to hear your input about this one. Yeah.
So it's an interesting question that you asked because there's actually two ways we can look at it. If we answer in, I call it the capacity
Right.
perspective, if I have a 90% CPU and I reduce that down to 10%, what did I just do? I just gave the business an additional 80% of potential capacity. I just increased the amount of transactions you could process on that system. And if those transactions are, I call it revenue generating transactions, we just increase the amount of revenue that you could
Right.
basically process on that system. The other way that we always look at it is, well, if I did reduce the CPU, then I could potentially reduce the size of the server, and then we free up some money, and
Right.
then that lowers your budget. So we always look at it both from a capacity perspective, and that's the most important one because that you always get the benefit of increased capacity, but you may not always get the benefit of reduced costs because you might have already bought that server and
Exactly.
it's a sunk cost. But that's why I
Right.
always say focus on the capacity first. That is definitive value back to you.
Right. And this is good because like one of the thing which is very common, like if you have something running in a transactional in a singular way, then it may just use one CPU and you will just like look at it. It's like one CPU being used. Awesome. But then don't you want 10 things running in a parallel? So
Yes.
that's the maximizing your resources. So I think, you that's exactly what you are pointing out. And I'm so delighted. So we need to define that purpose and we need to get that capacity out of our investments. So that's good. So next thing, this is a great example. Do you have any other example to talk about which is related to management of the server or like particular point, like beside, like we just talked about CPU,
Yep.
IO is very popular, but anything beside IO and CPU, do you have any example to share where we can see this impact or we can just measurement or a interesting story before we
Right.
move to the next conversation? Yeah.
When you think about, and I tell my team this, when they optimize a process or it might be an application process, it might not even be a database process. Always tell the story in two different ways. Tell me what you say from a technical perspective, and then tell me that story from the business terminology, right? And another area that we see a lot of people really making an impact in the database engineering world is as you start to look at blocking chains or deadlocks, right, or
Right.
other areas of the system where you can potentially delete or implement data compression. Each of those optimizations potentially has a cost savings, right? So
Right.
if I reduce blocking chains, the number of blocking chains that are happening, let's just say that there's 1,000 happening a week in a specific blocking chain. If I take that off, but that blocking time was 2 hours of wait time. Well,
Right.
those users that are waiting, whether it's a customer or an internal user, their time is of value. And that's where we could apply a financial against that. And that's where you can, again, implement and help solve that blocking chain, but then tell a story around, hey, again, you saved the company some money, or you helped reduce the cost of that transaction, right? So as you're looking through like database engine, like the database system, the SQL servers, there's a lot of different ways you're like, oh, I could tell this financial story this way, and it will allow me to tell this story or this story. So it's not just about, I call it CPU and code. There's a lot of other areas that you could say, hey, how much does this cost me in
Right.
that system?
So this brings me to the next set of questions, because when we open any book or anything,
Yep.
we always like to know, is it for us or not? Like or movie,
Yeah.
book or movie, like, yeah, oh, I like to watch the funny movies, rom-coms or action movies and things like we always want to know, is it this thing for us or not? So here is my
Correct.
question. When you're talking about FinOps, when you're talking about FinOps observability, who is the person who should be just start to think about it? Is it a DBA developer, or they should just go to their, this is a management thing?
Correct.
Who is the person who will start the conversation and bring the ecosystem around?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple key points in that question that you just asked. One is we are starting with the database engineer, because what we want to do is enable that database engineer to tell a better story. Because right now, a lot of DBAs are not heard within their organizations. They don't have the respect. The application developers are getting everything they need. Infrastructure controls the budget, controls the resources. They get, most of the stuff that they need. The business is just trying to innovate, but how do we get our voice out there? And then part of
Right.
it is like, how do we better, tell those better stories? And that's where, when and I'm going to give you a great example of how we are helping a database engineer even optimize the enterprise. That's one of the other things I've been speaking on, because as me and you talk about one server, well, that's
Right.
great. But if I just optimize one server, one query and one server, how much money am I really saving? Not that much money, right? So if I optimize the enterprise, a lot of your code runs across every server. Think about, a lot of us have DBA databases where we have our administrative processes in them. Well, I deploy that to every server. And we've seen some of this code. If you look at the enterprise, that code runs across 50 servers. That has
Right.
a single cost. And that's where it's enabling the database engineers to, optimize at the enterprise level. But the other group that is actually interested in this data are managers and VPs of IT and
Right.
CIOs. I have never seen those individuals get excited
Yeah.
at looking at database software.
Yeah.
Why are they looking? Because they've never been able to tell and share with the business that this customer is costing this much money to store
Right.
and process their data. This client is costing this much. And that's where chargeback and showback is another aspect, but different users are using it. Those are the managers, the application owners, right? So there's really a couple different audiences that are using it. The DBAs are using it for optimizing a server or the enterprise. Managers and application owners are using it for understanding I call it the resource footprint or the cost footprint of
Right.
supporting each database or clients.
Oh, this is fantastic. So, guys, those who are attending live right now and those who are watching, if you guys please understand this is being recorded. So, definitely, if you might be watching it recorded, then in that case, you can just write us email, which will be shared eventually, and ask your question. But those who are watching it live, feel free to post your question right now, any question related to anything in a question answer pen, and we would be happy to answer at the end of the call. So I just wanted to remind that it's not both of us are talking. This is about just discovering, understanding a new thing. So, and we want to know what kind of question you have it around FinOps, observability, where to start, not to start, or this is not something you really want to do. All welcome. So please go ahead and ask questions. So that's it. So I think coming back to our conversation, Ben, so what you are saying is that, actually FinOps observability is changing the conversation around data engineer and others together. But as a
Yes.
DBA or as a developer, I can take the first step and say, you know what? I think this set of code needs to be improved, and that has to be looked at everywhere else. And as a manager, they would just come up and say, you know what? If we do it on one server, if we are going to make this much saving, we can go to multiple server and having our clients with us. This is the cost which we are investing in it, and that gives them a proper view because most of the tool right now out are just counters. I mean,
Yes.
they're great. They're great. No criticism for anything. I'm just saying, when we look at the counters, I mean, it's not so encouraging. We just want to understand. Numbers needs
Yes.
to have a meaning. So yeah, I think this brings to the next question is about efficiency and how,
Hmm.
like you just talked about startup. Book is one thing. You just talk about your startup which is going on. You might have some clients there, and every client struggle with efficiency. So do you want
Correct.
to share some stories around it, or how
Yeah.
FinOps they encounter FinOps, or they didn't know this is a FinOps issue, and they just
Correct.
keep on banging their head there.
So efficiency is something I'm very passionate on. When I sign a book, and this was a sort of a funny story.
Sure.
I took my book to yeah, she's over data at a large bank, and she's like, "Hey Ben, can you sign it?" And I said, "Absolutely." I was like, "How do you sign it? What do you put in there?" So I wrote something, but then a wise person told me you have to pick a single saying to sign it, and it makes it a lot easier. I signed my book with efficiency mindset. Why do I do
Right.
that? Because when we think about everything that we're designing, we really need to think that, you know, this is going to last for 10 years. I need to be efficient, because then it's going to cost less money. It's going to be faster, probably more simple to implement, more simple to support. And efficiency doesn't just revolve around the server that we're talking about, like meaning production. Because like one of the most important things, I don't know if you have kids or not, right? I have a couple kids, and what happens in the playroom? They
Right.
create all this, toys everywhere. Production servers are sort of like that. They're messy. What do we do as data engineers? We go and clean that up. Well, once we clean it up, what do we tell our kids? Hey, pick up after yourselves. So
Right.
one of the things that I'm talking about on efficiency is we are not only focused on looking at systems through a FinOps perspective or an enterprise perspective. We're focused on efficiency of designing better code, better data models. So what we're doing is we're talking and shifting left. We're
Right.
actually talking to developers now. So the majority of people that are really excited with wisdom are developers, because now they could see what does that code look like, and we actually have an efficiency score. So every piece of code, we actually have a score that says 0 to 100. Am I efficient or not? Because
Wow.
unless I know that I'm efficient, how does a developer know whether or not they could tune it more or optimize it more before they promote it to production? So what we're
Right.
doing is enabling the data engineers to not only optimize production, but we're also enabling the developers to write more efficient code. And I have a great blog post out there on this. I think our acceptance criteria for code promoting or code promotions into production needs to change. Most of us are only talking about, does it work? Does it break anything? If it works, I promote it.
Right.
What did I just do? If it is a very, what I call expensive piece of code, whether it's resource view or financial view, I just increased and promoted. I just decreased my capacity, increased my costs by
Right.
not asking the simple question, hey, Pinal, could you have
Yeah.
coded that more efficiently? And your answer is probably like, yes. So the thing I always want you guys to do, if you ever write or design processes, ask the question, can I make this any more efficient? Because most of the things that we do will live in production for many, many
Right.
years. And that's
Yeah,
where we're shifting left and focusing on the live environments.
right. Once upon a time, one wise person told me there is nothing more permanent than temporary fix. And that's exactly what you are saying. Like we will
Yes.
just say, we'll fix this later. I think we should just say, we'll fix this never. Like all the thing which we just
Yeah.
promoted sometime when we are in a rush or we are just running behind some different metrics or KPIs and we just promote and then we never look back and understand. So I think there are two interesting
Unless it's
questions,
broken. I just
unless it
say
is broken.
unless it's
Yeah,
broken, then that's our one time to get something
correct.
fixed. But usually they
Yeah,
say just add more CPU and we're
right.
gonna power through this change. And I just
Right.
again became less efficient, right?
Yeah, like, and they say always keep it simple or don't fix it until it's broken, and all this thing somehow
Yes.
keeps on. They're so now they're so true, but we keep on saying it. So I think there are two interesting questions, which is right now. I think we are in a right in the middle time, and two interesting questions. So let's just answer them before we continue, and they are actually good pathway to the next one. The first question is that can we do this thing in the beginning, so to speak? So I think, can we do this? I mean, FinOps Observability. It seems like as a developer, use these tools to build better right from the start.
Yes.
How hard
Yes.
it is to set up? How do we start from the day moment one? Yeah,
Yes.
that's the first
And
question. Yeah,
yeah, so right now we're working with a client I've worked with and I met back in early 2000s, and it's the top system in a certain vertical. I'm not naming the vertical, but that system's been running for 25 years. And they never, and I still am friends with those developers. And I say, did you ever think your system was going to be online for 25 years? They said no. And
yeah,
that's the challenge. So everything you design, really design for the long term. And
right,
that's a challenge because most of us never think that we will be around for the code or design will be around for that long. So that's one of the challenges is a lot of us are so focused on today, and we're focused on 2-week sprints or very fast agile processes. So I think, how do we slow down a little bit to write better or design better processes?
right. And I think this is good. So this is excellent. And we should just start from the day one. And I think that's what it is. And I think the second question also answered part of the first question, which I'm going to ask, is how to start with FinOps as a DBA. I think you said some of the things, some of the great
Yeah.
things, but if we can just give him 3 or 4 things that that how do we start with FinOps as a DBA? Tell me one thing I want to learn,
Yes.
something like that.
So our goal is not to make anybody's life more complex or difficult, right? And what we're doing is only adding a different view of the same data that you already manage, right? So all that we're doing is enabling you to tell 2 stories versus one. You could continue to tell your regular story, but when you need to sell something, need to get that approval, need to get that buy-in, use dollars, and that's where it's helping your conversation. So we're not trying to change the world right now, but what we're doing is trying to change the conversation so that eventually you could start to change the world by getting your changes, your recommendations into production to actually solve those issues, whatever those issues are.
Right.
And
And
let me give a good example of like how powerful this could be. There's
correct.
a if you guys have a SaaS implementation, like a SaaS product, and you have a federated database where you have a database for each client. Those are great examples of where you can save enormous amounts of money, and by optimizing a single piece of code. And one of our clients saved about $1 million by optimizing one piece of code. That's a big
Wow.
number. And guess
That,
what? They're treated like a hero, and everybody's like clapping for them. You guys could do that same thing too.
and the secret thing, I know you don't want to talk about it, but how do I do? Like, look at me, I'm a DBA. I want to save money for my client. Can you just point me to one direction where I can read more, I can download more?
Yes.
I know you want to stay more focused on this, but any
Yeah.
tool do you think we can
Yes.
start with?
So one of the things that we're doing in the product that we're designing is called Wisdom, and it's top down. And the reason it's top down because we talk about optimizing the enterprise. So there's a view in Wisdom that allows you to see the top processes by cost. And a
Interesting.
unique thing that we identified during our research is there's something called the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times people say 80-20 or 90-10. So in technology, even for data, if you look at all your index optimizations or index utilization statistics, or your top code across, all of your procedural cache,
Right.
10% of your code or 10% of your top tables, meaning the tables that are inserted, updated, and read the most, equal
Right.
90% of your capacity or
Mm-hmm.
90% of your cost. What that really means is when you are looking at optimizing, you don't have to optimize 500 pieces of code. Usually you're optimizing maybe 5 or 10 to really make a huge difference. And the same thing with indexes too. So those are some of the other statistics that we found that were sort of interesting through our research as well.
Correct. And so I think you talked about a little bit about wisdom, and so that's good. So it's actually what you're talking about is changing culture or processes, right? With the wisdom,
Yes.
because we are not only looking at cost, but we are not only looking at code or anything, or just like, oh, create an index, but we are actually talking about what it actually means and how it's going to be effective in terms of cost effectiveness or not effectiveness in general, right? So can you just talk about, so you talked about the success story about that, like 1 million saving, but how does it really affect the bottom line, or is it also affecting the top line as well for clients? How is any experience, any thing which you have encountered in last 5 years working with wisdom and your organization?
Yeah. One of the best things that I call when you start to optimize processes, and it's sort of similar to the capacity. When we talk to product owners, right, that own a product, that they're responsible for selling more revenue for that product to be able to generate a certain amount of money. The other opportunity that they have is to increase their margin, basically reduce the costs of their services that are supporting that app. Well, that's where Wisdom's helping the clients reduce the costs that are basically supporting and running their application. Because whenever you are optimizing and saying, hey, I could design this data model more efficiently, I could optimize and reduce this blocking chain, I could implement and optimize these indexes, right? Technically, you're reducing the cost of those applications. So you're actually making additional profit for that company. So that's where we see the biggest benefit is for clients that have existing applications that they resell out to the marketplace. You're actually reducing their total cost of ownership, which increases the profit they make.
Right. And now I want to just ask one question about your book again, and then we will continue our primary conversation, which we are doing right now, which is interesting. So now, when you wrote a book, you wrote it during the COVID times, and there was no boom of the artificial intelligence or Gen
Correct.
AI, which we have today. I mean, it was
Yes.
there in one way or other way. We had Gen AI. Now, if you are in a Gen AI area, which we see a lot of tools, I'm not going to name any
Right.
one, all of the tools. What would you like to add as an addendum to your book now with this particular scenario or environment or ecosystem? Which chapter would you add?
Well, I'm going to actually probably answer based upon a conversation I had with one of the hyperscalers. So I had the privilege of talking to somebody that was responsible for a lot of the infrastructure for one of the hyperscalers, one of the big three, cloud providers. And this individual and I were talking about AI because he's responsible for a lot of the hardware for supporting the AI products and services. And he said, hey, if I had 100,000 GPUs tomorrow, I wouldn't be
Wow.
able to answer all the questions today. I said, well, you're in a scarcity mindset. And I said, so you're having to solve problems differently. And when you think about AI, very, very powerful. But right now, everybody's just trying to create the most powerful features. They're actually not focused on efficiency of those algorithms. Because if I did optimize, I call it those LLMs by 1%, I probably wouldn't need to buy those 100,000 GPUs. So even when you look at AI and what it could potentially do as a benefit for all the businesses, services, all the different use cases, AI is actually very, very inefficient at running to answer
Right.
your questions, right? And it's costing enormous amounts of money. OpenAI just raised an additional amount of money because their costs are going up and up and up. So that's sort of
Yeah.
a different way to answer your question, but I think that's just as important.
Absolutely. And I think that brings me to a very interesting conversation. One of the person I met, and they just use AI to add indexes,
Yes,
and they did well. That they did well. And then their question was, "Look, I throw this query to the AI. I got this thing right. What do you have to say?" I looked at him and I said, "If it did right, then now we have to solve the next problem, which you are not aware of it." Because you
yes,
never plan for that.
yeah,
You only looked at that one problem. You want to fix it with index, but you never went beyond that. Now you have no
yeah,
plan. After fixing that, now we have a bigger problem of we don't know where do we want to go. And
yeah.
they were like, yeah, that's true. So I think that brings back to our original question. Like, when we are talking about FinOps observability, I mean, so how do you see that impacting any SQL server or any SQL product like MariaDB, MySQL, or Postgres? How
Correct.
do you think FinOps observability will directly impact beside everything which we discussed? Like, do you think people will start saying queries cost? Right now, query is cost, but not that cost. The dollar amount cost in a future, or people are going to say, do we want to build this kind of database because each database is costing us $400? Because now things are going in Azure. So people are
Yes,
really slowly, Azure or AWS, understanding that there is a cost to the data,
yes,
cost to the processing, which was just there previously, free,
yeah,
understood free when it was on
yes.
premises. So, what do you want to say about all this? The Azure AI, all things which I just put together.
Microsoft's investing a lot, and you see that in Azure SQL on some of the unique stuff they're leveraging AI to advise and I call it
Right?
self-optimize these systems, right? It's very
Correct.
powerful. So if you think about the full ecosystem, so I design a data model, I promote it out there, I write some code against that data model, I start to bring my application online, put data in there, right? Uh, AI can be looking at a lot of these statistics over time and start to really help automate probably a lot of the code generation, but also a lot of the optimization as well. But one of the things it will still need is, how do I interpret if something's efficient? Well, we need to train it on that, or it could use like efficiency scores like we do. I also think when you look at cost, as we start to identify cost of statements and cost of code, we will need to accept and reject based upon cost. Or if we find high cost code, I think we would have it regenerated by an LLM, right?
Okay.
Rewritten, and then it would go through your regression testing, and it's going to create sort of an automatic cycle. Uh, and I see all these things are as benefits for us because yes, we won't have to do some of these tasks, but the company needs your data expertise to help support those data analytical projects, some of these other projects around the cloud migrations, etc. So it's freeing up your time to do more valuable things in that business.
That's awesome. So this is one of the pitfall which you just mentioned, that people just do not put a quantity or efforts the measure. They don't measure it. And any other pitfall you want to just throw it out, like these are the common mistakes people might be doing. I might be doing, but I'm not trained to look at my mistakes. So
Yes.
what kind of the pitfall organization, as an organization, an individual like us, me, are doing, and we are not aware of it? If you just want to
Yes.
pinpoint and highlight. So as soon as my call is over, I would start introspecting.
The question I'll ask you is, what's the most important thing you're going to do today that's going to make the biggest difference tomorrow that aligns with your KPIs? So if you think about that statement, within your organization, you have certain goals set within technology, within the application, within your business unit. Okay.
Right.
What are the tasks? Because you might have hundreds or thousands of databases. You have noise everywhere. You have people asking you to promote code, patch servers, fix this production issue, solve this performance problem. There's so many things you can do. but what's the one thing or two things you're going to do today that's going to make the biggest difference to the systems that actually helps those systems become better, that aligns with your objectives, right? And that's
Right.
tough because in all the tools, you sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier, all these tools just show you data. That's one challenge with observability. They just show you more and more data. Do we need more data or less? What we really need is simple. We need simple, right?
Right.
Because if it's very simple on out of these 1,000 things I can do, what are the two at the top of that list at the enterprise level that will make and improve the health of my systems the most, or take out the most cost, or increase the capacity, or enhance the security? Because it ultimately does depend on what is your goal or objective. Is it security, availability, performance, cost, performance? We have to define what that goal is, and then that
Right.
helps you identify what is your task that you need to focus on.
Fantastic. And I think this is good because, I think there's a classic example I keep on coming across. Like client comes and a friend comes and tells you, oh, there are thousands of scans happening on this particular table. And our
Yeah.
point is, great. Like, he was like, are you going to tell me something? Are they good? Are they bad? Is
Yeah.
it needed? How many times they're happening? Was it just one time during the busy time? You are telling me cumulative number that tells me nothing. So, I mean, till the dynamic management view and some of the other insight which started to come in a SQL Server and other products, we were all blind. We were just going
Yes.
with the Windows counters and we believed in it. And they were right. They were great at the
Right.
time. But when I look at now, I want it more meaningful. I have a
Yes.
questions and I wanted to have a meaningful. Like when I look at two indexes, my first question to myself is, which one of this will be more beneficial to my database, right? That's
Correct.
kind of small version, micro mini, maybe FinOps observability. Would you say that or
Correct.
not?
Well, let's again, you just told me a technical story. Let's tell that story through a financial or FinOps version, right? So
Okay,
I have a piece of code that costs, a certain amount of money. I could potentially add one index or two. Wait, indexes actually take up a little space. Let's just say
right,
it's a very big table. So we have a table that actually has, 500 million rows in it, and it's about 17 gigs. We'll just say that because there's some large data types in there, right? So when I add an index, let's say that index is going to cost me $20 for storage and to add. And by the way, for indexes, there's actually compute time and memory time and bandwidth. So there's actually additional costs, not just storage. So let's just say that that index costs me $30 over the next year. But I
wow,
optimize and add that index, and it reduces that cost of that code from $5,000 down to $100 because I'm removing the scan of the very large 500 million record table, and now I'm
right,
doing a seek right on the data. So what
right.
I just did was I just saved $4,900. It only cost me $30 to add
Yes,
that index to save $4,900. Do you want to buy that? Absolutely, right?
yes.
You do that all day long.
That's such a fantastic story. I mean, I'm just telling you, I'm not praising you, but I never thought this way. I think this is going to help me talk to a lot of my future clients or partners also that when
Yeah.
we talk about this one, because I keep on getting like, how do you define this? What is the end goal? And I also sometimes can't explain in the words, but I think that's what it is. I think we still have a guys. If you have any other questions, please let us know. I have a before I would give a chat. We have still 15 minutes, so I want to play a game with you. And I didn't talk about this game with you initially to you at all.
Okay.
The reason is that then the fun will go away. So I'm going
Yes.
to ask you 5 or 7 questions where I'll let you pick something. Like the question would be something similar, and you just have to pick one. You can't pick
Okay.
two. You can't say both. Like example would be speed or security. Now both are important. So you just have to say one. And I want to see what you come up with it because this is going to be fun for all of us to think. And I think every audience,
Yes.
either you're live or you are watching it recorded, please try to answer it. I think it's going to be fun for all of us. So 7 question I'm going
Yes.
to start with.
As
The
long as
very
I don't
first,
fail, because it's like
everybody passes.
I'm terrible at
Yeah.
tests.
Yeah, no, everybody passes it just to understand the mindset, it's something fun. So the first question I would say, cost saving or performance optimization?
I'm going to say cost savings.
Automation or human insight or human oversight?
I'd say automation.
Cloud or on premises?
I would say cloud.
Innovation or stability?
So that's a trick question, but we have to go with stability.
Ah, that's awesome. Because ultimately it's a big organization. Innovation is all we want both. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
That's you, as you said, it's a
But if
trick
your
question. But
if your
yeah,
ship is sinking, it
yeah,
doesn't matter about
yeah.
the meal you're serving.
Exactly. If you're not going to serve your client tomorrow, you better be stable. So this was a trick question, and there is a one more trick. There are last two questions left before we will go to the audience questions. So uh, that one was asked to me was efficiency or accuracy. Accuracy is always better. If you're efficient, but if you're not doing anything, what's the point?
Correct.
So here is the one question to you: is proactive monitoring or reactive troubleshooting?
I'm gonna switch the term on the first one. Proactive optimization.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what would you like to know as a book author or startup founder? Oh, trick one.
I always like founder because I like to innovate and there's a lot of problems that I want to help solve out there in the marketplace. So
Right.
I think founder.
So yeah, you're a founder of a book, so that's awesome too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we found a right balance there with this one. I think it was fun. A lot of good comments people are also answering. So thank you guys for participating this one. I really appreciate you are answering and those who are watching recording. I hope you guys also liked it. So there is a very last question I'm going to ask,
Yes.
and then I think we can wrap it up. So this was great talking to you, Ben. I mean, I cannot tell you how much fun and how much good insight it is, and I hope we can watch all this recording afterwards. So I just want to start FinOps. I know you are and FinOps Observability, and I know you
Correct.
have your own product. I don't want you to talk too much, but can you just tell us a little bit about it? Like, what are the three main problems you have solved recently, or maybe in a part of a roadmap, and
Correct.
just name and where we can find and learn more about this?
Number one is there's a great image that is out there that has Apollo 4, the old space capsule that went to space, the space shuttle and SpaceX, all next to each other. And in Apollo, there's two seats and all these switches with one little screen. In the space shuttle, still two seats, two joysticks, probably 10 screens, and about 1,000 buttons.
Right.
In SpaceX, three screens, two joysticks, and very, very, very few buttons. And the reason why I love that image is it's about simplicity. So one of the things that we are doing as, by the way, guys, our environments are not going to get less complex. We're going to have more data everywhere, more processes, code running everywhere. And what we need is more simple. So I wear this Aura ring right here. It's very simple. I have a sleep score, I have a readiness score. How do we have simple scores for your environment? So wisdom, we have 4 simple scores for you to understand the health, the capacity, and performance of your environment. Number 2, we are putting financials throughout the tool so that you could tell a technical story and
Right.
do everything that you do today, but you could also tell a financial story. So if you're a consultant, if you are just a DBA inside a company, you could have those better conversations with your manager or your client saying, here's the value I brought you, right? And really, the third one is we are enabling clients and you to forecast and understand capacity over years, cost over years, because we all like big numbers. In the United States, we have like something called the lottery. And it's
Right.
interesting because people don't play it unless it's like $500 million. But why don't people play it when it's like 10 million? It's still a big number. We all like big numbers. So when inside of wisdom, when we forecast this out, the reason why we forecast is 2 reasons. One is if you do not make this change today, this is what you're deciding to consume over the next year, both resources and cost. And then we use those big numbers, because if I say, Dave or Pinal,
Yeah.
how do you want to optimize this piece of code? It's only 50 CPU cycles. You're like, I don't worry about that. But if I said, hey, you're going to use 5 trillion CPU cycles over this next year, can we optimize it? You're like, 5 trillion? That's a big number. We need to
Right.
fix this. So
Absolutely.
forecasting is allowing you to tell a better story, but it really is allowing you to also better plan. Where will you be in a year as your data continues to grow on average 23%, your business
Right.
grows, and innovation continues to grow? Those are the top 3 things that we're bringing to the DBAs to better help them be successful.
Oh, this is fantastic. No, thank you very, very much. And I hope there would be a poll also on the screen. Those who want to participate, please go ahead. We want to know if you really find this topic interesting or not. So that's there. And also, please do sign up for further events. There are lots kind of fun. Today, we had a conversation. We'll have a more technical, different variety. We'll do our best. And I think Team Fortified will be also helping us to come up with the new things as we go. This is just the beginning of this interesting concept. So, with that, I want to say really, really thank you. Please, guys, participate, sign up, watch it. If you like it, write an email afterward, try out various tools, and just in general, pay attention to what you are doing and how you're going to make difference in the future. So, any final statement from you, Ben? Otherwise, it was amazing. Thank you.
For your time today, and it's great seeing you again, and hopefully I'll see you in Seattle or another city sometime. And
Yes.
everybody, thanks for attending. If you guys have any questions, my email is going to be along with the post, and feel free to hear your comments and recommendations.
So with that, thank you, everybody.